All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining in on the Marine Institute Graduate Society Seminar Series. We meet every week on Wednesdays at noon. This is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can find most of all of our seminars over the past couple of years. Before we start, we do want to provide a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunavut and Nunatuckavut, and the Innu of Netassmen and their ancestors as the original peoples of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. Now, please join us in welcoming Dr. William Montevecchi. Dr. Montevecchi is a John Lewis Paton Distinguished University Professor here at MUN. He primarily studies the behavioral ecology of seabirds, but also touches on many other fields. To tie it in with the work we do here at the Marine Institute, he does work with local fishers trying to mitigate seabird bycatch, among other things that deal with our field, basically. Dr. Montevecchi has over 400 publications, and in 2020 was ranked in the top 1% of cited marine biologists in the world, and I think top 2% in cited scientists of any field, which is really cool. So my introduction to Bill was at a Halloween event last year. Some students
Wait
of
a
a certain
second.
lab.
I don't think I remember this, Colin.
No, I didn't meet you. Some students of a certain lab dressed up as puffins.
Wait a second.
And then one of the people in this group was a birder, and I thought maybe he was like a stereotypical birder. But I asked who he was supposed to be, and he said Bill Montevecchi, and I was like, who? And then they proceeded to tell me all about the legend of Bill, and so I knew I had to get to do a seminar with you, so that's when I emailed you. And now
you poor guy. Yeah.
So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, well, I'm glad we met before. I just want to say thank you very much, and thank you, folks at the Marine Institute. We do a lot of collaborative work. Colin just mentioned Pierre-Paul Paton. God, my cell phone's ringing. Isn't that crazy? Let me shut her off. It's mucking me up here. Yeah, so we do lots of work with people at the Marine Institute, and Colin had just mentioned Pierre-Paul Paton, who's people work there, and he collaborates with lots of students. So anyway, today what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over three major. I've got a lot to say. You know, when you've been doing it as long as I have, my cell phone keeps going off here. When you've been doing it as long as I have, you got a lot to say, and I just want to go over three major initiatives that are ongoing in our lab. And the paradox about saying a lot, it's crazy, but it is a paradox. It means that you actually leave a lot out. So I hope I don't assume too much about, seabird biology for non-bird people or whatever, but anyway, let's charge ahead. So the objectives for today's talk are, overview our three major research initiatives, taking a multi-species approach, and three topics, major investigation topics right now, center on climate, fisheries bycatch, and anthropogenic light. And we use this, obviously for these investigations for basic information, basic research, but also for evidence-based, help with management, with mitigation, with conservation, and we also engage in outreach. So just to take a peek at the lab logo, we've had this for a long time, and I'll tell you why there's three birds on there. And we initially, about maybe 3 decades ago, we were studying energetics, and there were questions like, do seabirds compete with fisheries? It's kind of like the seal question today. But So we were studying energetics. So how much food do seabirds need and what do they consume? So there's about 20 seabirds that breed in Newfoundland and Labrador, but we focused on these three for a particular reason. We get the full range of body sizes from kilograms to kilogram to tens of grams. We get the full range of population sizes, millions, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands. We get the full range of ways that birds catch fish, plunge diving, pursuit diving, surface gleaning, and probably most importantly, for thinking about food webs, we actually get the full range of trophic interactions from large pelagic fish, same size as we, herring and mackerel, forage fish like capelin, and planktivores in the ocean. So that's been our basic approach, and I'll use that today. And I'll use each of these species to highlight a different research topic. So we'll start with climate effects. These are northern gannets. There's about 40 colonies in the North Atlantic. Kyle Donteron put this map together, and it's quite interesting. You can see from our place in eastern Canada through Iceland, around the UK, and up in Norway, you can see that distribution of colonies. So it's a North Atlantic bird. Our colonies happen to be the southernmost in this layout of the species range. So that was interesting, particularly in terms of climate change. But what's also interesting, when you just take a quick look at broad scale oceanography, where we are happens to be the lowest, I'm sure most people probably know this, the lowest Arctic penetration in the North Atlantic. We're in ice water, we're in iceberg water. So even though our colonies are the southernmost for the species, we're still in warmer water, colder water, sorry, than gannet colonies, in southern Iceland, all the gannet colonies in the UK, and most of the gannet colonies in Norway. But again, this study is a comparative study of you know the extreme the extreme breeding range of the species, and that's what we want to look, because the climate change question and where are species probably at their tolerances, it's at the extremes of their range. Why do they not nest any further south? Why do they not nest any further north? So that's been the focus. It's a comparative study, and we'll start here at Cape St. Mary's, because this was just one of those things that just fell in our lap. And and we're going to focus on these southernmost colonies here in Canada. These are the southernmost colonies in the world. There's one in southern France that's comparable. We're not looking at these two colonies. They're in the Labrador Current, whereas our birds are a bit in a bit warmer water than those northeast coast ones. Anyway, this is our perspective, our target colonies. Here's Cape St. Mary's. If you haven't been there, I hope you would go. It's spectacular. If you don't like boats, you can walk to the cliff edge and see the birds about 50 feet away. Actually, those are people. I can just see those are people right there just coming up to the cliff edge, and you can see the gannets across the way there. Spectacular. So this is just a white flush of gannets. There's murres, there's kittiwakes. Spectacular. So anyway, what happened that just was a real head scratcher? In 2012, on August 7th, I got a call from one of the naturalists or tourism guides at Cape St. Mary's, and he said, all the gannets have left Cape St. Mary's. And he's a practical joker of a guy. So I didn't really pay much attention. As a matter of fact, I probably told him a couple of jokes, and we nod back and forth. And anyways, He's right. All the gannets did leave Cape St. Mary's. This is unprecedented. I mean, people have been studying gannets for hundreds of years. There's no event like this that's ever been recorded. There's some rare, seabirds in general, rarely. There's been some colony abandonments with El Niños in the Pacific. And, a friend of mine was studying MERS in Alaska, and he said there was probably an El Niño effect there as well. But anyway, so on August 6th, I just want to show you before I just keep talking about it. You can see these are low grade, low quality photos, but it's what we got. This is just what the naturalist had. This is the 6th of August 2012. You can see all the birds, tens of thousands of birds there. And this is a day later. And actually, there's no photograph on the 7th when the birds actually abandoned because of the fog. This is the foggiest place in Newfoundland. They just couldn't take it because of fog. But here's the 8th. And on the 7th, you can see the result of the abandonment. All that white is gone. There's some chicks, a few adults. But the crazy thing is that 20,000 birds left on one day. So the question then becomes, now oh, there we go. My PowerPoint was locking up there. The question, well, what's going on and why? Simultaneous departure, that seems nuts. The birds had to be under stress. We know there was a horrific thunderstorm on the evening of 6 and 7 August, but these birds have evolved with thunderstorms, so I wouldn't attribute that to this mass exodus. And clearly, it must, if birds are under stress, it usually has something to do with food. So, that's essentially our working hypothesis. And then there was lots of, anecdotal and some measurement that we could get of collateral issues happening: chicks underweight, chicks starving, chicks dying. Horrific observations of chicks begging for food from parents who had returned. Parents, these birds feed by regurgitation feeding. Parents trying to feed and had no food. And the situation essentially resolved itself after a couple of weeks and things, but there were costs, and we'll look at those and what happened. But what's interesting about, and I'm not sure this is anomalous in the long term, but I just want to show what it was: about a 2-degree spike in temperature on the evening before, from about 16, whatever, 16-ish to over 18, and this all happened in a day, so boom, it's like, it's not, yeah, the water's getting hotter, but boom, big gradient right here. And so that looks like it might have had something to do with the birds leaving right after that. That also would have precipitated a thunderstorm. That kind of temperature fluctuation would also generate or come from atmospheric disturbance. Anyway, so let's look at the temperature. The red line is the 16-degree isotherm, and you can see where it is. This is, this is in that immediate time frame, and these are the colonies that we're looking at, and those little dashed lines are their foraging ranges. So for all of these birds at that time, the water in their foraging ranges was, well above 16. It might have been 18. I mean, this is for Newfoundland. This is hot water. It's not warm water. It's hot water. It's an ocean heat wave. So why might that have, had something to do with their food? Well, their preferred food is Atlantic mackerel. Their preferred food has a temperature, preference and essentially tolerance in the 9 to 13-degree range, and will avoid water actually above 15 degrees. So, that really becomes, the best we can pin together to think about, well, that looks like what's going on. And there are other considerations. When gannets dive for fish like mackerel or Atlantic sorry, these large pelagics, mackerel's like a small tuna, burst speed of about 18 body lengths a second, if you can even imagine that. It's like a bullet. And, so to get it, again, it's got to, dive like a peregrine falcon, and it's steep, fast, quick. But the essence of the depth of that dive is, less than 10 meters. So what that means is any mackerel that's deeper in the water, I don't know how deep mackerel go, but any mackerel that's deeper than 10 meters in the water column is non-existent for a gannet. It's simply unavailable. We know gannets can dive deeper. We know they can dive to about 20 meters, a little bit more than 20 meters, but those are different kinds of dives. Those are underwater flapping dives with propulsion, and it gets them to forage fish. It would never allow them to catch a mackerel. Anyway, so there's constraints on the bird on what it can get. When we look at the costs of what happened that year, this is the lowest breeding success on record for Cape St. Mary's, 41%, and then completely anomaly. So this was widespread, the heat wave and the consequences, some abandonment at Bonaventure as well, and the reproductive success, less than 10%. These are anomalous, as far as we've been keeping records, period. And this, and Kyle Dontermont put this together as part of his master's, and we can see there's a long-term shift from about a 75% breeding success before that heat wave. So it's almost like a physical forcer turn the system around, and then we're down to 50% in the decades since. And why that's important, and again Kyle highlighted this, is that unless those birds get a 65% breeding success, it's not going to sustain the population. So that's been going on for a decade. These birds live for 20 years, but this isn't a good sign, a good population sign. And again, from Kyle, it looks like when the SST is most critical, and this is SST within the foraging range of gannets that Kyle has tracked. So this is late in the breeding season. It's in August and September, and you can see that the trend over the decades is for increasing water temperature at that time. So it's not looking like things are going to change, at least in terms of ocean climate. So now to just look back at the other side of the ocean. Here we are, to get back to our comparison, here we are in Newfoundland, and here you can see the population trends, and these are since 1980 for Newfoundland and Quebec. That's the entire North Atlantic population, and again you can see a growing trajectory has leveled out, which would be, at least in the later years, consistent with that poor reproductive success, but it might not be generating it. Completely different situation at the northern extreme of the range, where there are small colonies, some are being established, and they're all growing. So what's happening? We know the North Atlantic is warming, and we know there's lots of evidence about fish fish populations expanding northward. And so let's just take a look at the mackerel on the other side of the ocean, where the gannets are doing well. And this is from Ollis Dottir, an ICES publication. And I think it's 218, but this is density of mackerel along the Norwegian coast, 2007, 10, 11, 12, up through 16, across and down. And you can see this incredible expansion this is a warm water pelagic fish, and it's expanding into the Arctic, where, at least in my lifetime, it has not been. And so because of that warming water, it's going up there, and it looks like that's part of what's facilitating the gannet, gannet growth on that side, on the northeast extension of their range, at the northern limit of their range. So it looks like it's going to be pretty good for gannets as it goes, as mackerel becomes abundant in the area of the Arctic. Mackerel are moving over, southern Iceland, even to western Greenland. Bluefin tuna are doing this as well. And then when you look at our side, this is the standing stock biomass of mackerel. Well, it's crushed and it's below the critical zone, and we know that there's fishing pressure and a lot of fishing pressure, and as there are on pelagics in general, but there has been a lot of fishing pressure on the mackerel in particular. So to conclude, this part of the program, it looks like they're opposing warming effects at the breeding range limits of the gannet, challenging the birds in the south, enhancing those birds nesting in the north. There's warm water effects on Atlantic mackerel availability that, the gannets are secondary exploiters of the fish that are primary, respondents to changing ocean temperature. So it seems like it's mackerel availability that may be the driver for what's going on for gannets, and there's other large pelagics involved. And in general, for mackerel, it looks like, strange as it seems, and there are food web effects here as well, but too hot in the south and warming in the north, and in the south, overfishing may be synergizing with that warm water effect. Excuse me. So I just want to move on to the second component, which is fisheries bycatch. And to do that, we're going to look at the murre, because this is a bird that gets whacked in gill nuts. And so we'll take a look at this. This is a major initiative for the past, 5-6 years. And clearly, bycatch is a major problem. Most research has been carried out in the southern oceans, most of it with longline fisheries, and most of it focused on birds like the one hooked here, albatross. But also, it's a major problem for fisheries, whales, sharks, turtles. But in the northern hemisphere, we have long lines, and it's problems for birds and some other species at times as well. But the big issue in the northern hemisphere are gill nets. And, we know that hundreds of thousands of birds are killed per annum in gill nets in the northern hemisphere. And and we also know it's the most destructive gear that inshore fishermen can use, and people fishing offshore as well. And just in terms of compared to long lines for I don't want to compare with draggers and things like that, but it's a destructive gear. We know that, everybody knows it, but it's a gear of choice because of its high catch rates, and there's a high bycatch. So it's basically two kinds of and maybe more, but basically two types of gill nets, one that are high in the water column and others that are deep set. The one here, the example here, is a drift net, which we don't have, and we do have high set gill nets, and this is a bottom set demersal net, but sometimes they're just deep in the water column. They don't have to be on the bottom, but two types. And primarily the surface nets, they catch salmon, which I want to focus on, but also herring surface nets are used, and the deep nets for cod and turbot, for ground fish. And they do catch birds, murres, gannets. That's a salmon net on the left and a herring net on the right. So the interesting thing that struck me, and I just feel so fortunate because I had so many incredible graduate students in the lab. At the time, I was working with Ram Myers. We could grapple with a problem. We just knew, well, if they close the fishery, this is really an ocean basin gill net removal experiment, and tens of thousands of nets came out of the water. So can we use this as an experiment? And Paul Regular, who's a research scientist at DFO, I mean, he just did this as an aside from his PhD, to tell you the truth, and such a brilliant guy. These are the colony. We wanted to look at we wanted to look at population response before and after the moratorium. These are the colonies that we used of seabirds. They're all ecological reserves, this is what the gillnet distribution looked like in the pre-moratorium. And then when it closed, that gear came out of the water, but there clearly was a lot of jockeying around, and a lot of it moved offshore for turbot and other things. But again, what happened is that within the foraging ranges of these birds, the gear is gone. So that was the experiment. That's the experimental manipulation. And so our hypothesis is, and it's a long-term hypothesis, that fisheries influences seabirds. We know that, but it has multiple consequences that they aren't necessarily all unidirectional. Um, the fishery generated, when it was ongoing in the 80s before the moratorium, it generated hundreds of thousands of tons of discards and offal, and that fed lots of scavenging birds like shearwaters and gulls. But yet at the same time, when that inshore fishery is ongoing, in the 80s, the number of gill nets just kept increasing, and that's taking a toll on the diving species like puffins and murres. So when the fishery closed, the nets come out, the discards stop. And the prediction is that, well, we're going to see a blip in population change for, those surface feeding gulls and scavengers, and we're going to see a positive population response on the part of the diving species like puffins and murres. And just for a quick summary of that, yes, that's exactly what happened. And realize this is, we did this in 2012, so there was 20 years between the closure of the fishery and as we're looking at population change over those 2 decades. But here are the diving species: gannet, puffin, razorbill. So if you're above the line, population response was positive. Pre to post moratorium. If you're below the line, population change was negative. And these are the surface feeding birds that we had population counts for: kittiwake and 2 species of gull. So this is actually the first demonstration that, in fact, bycatch can have population effects. For all those studies to date, it probably is the case, but it's much more highly inferred than this particular result shows. But, it hasn't gone away. This is 2007. This is just 3 gill nets, one morning, Witless Bay. The fisherman fills up his truck with 300 common murres that were probably all breeders from and this is the way it is. It's episodic. You can go out, fish 25 days in a row and maybe get a bird or 2, and then one day you get 300 birds. So it's just the way, and it's probably because of the movement of the capelin. And why that kind of mortality can be significant is because, these birds, they have a delayed maturity. So adult mortality, they don't breed till they're about 4 or 5 years old. So adult mortality is a big population driver. And as well, they have obligate by parental care, meaning one bird can't rear a chick by itself. And so and that's probably 300 breeders in that truck there. Once the breeder drowns, it essentially means 2 dead birds, because the parent and the chick, and then there's a disruption of mating for the surviving parent. So it's a real hit when a bird that's a breeder gets caught. So anyway, knowing all these things and knowing that we had a population effect, the next step was, well, let's try some mitigation. And these are high contrast flags that were designed by a sensory physiologist. He's actually an ecologist as well. And, he said, if birds are going to see anything underwater, this is it. Particularly that high contrast checkered pattern on the right. So for 3 years, we put these on boats with fishermen. I've got a video here I could show you, but I think I want to make sure I get through my my talk. We can go back to this, but it'll show you the flags on the nets, the herring. We did it with herring nets and with commercial fishermen, and I can show you that. But if you want to see it, I kind of like it, but I just want to keep going. So anyways, I mean, the result was, and you might say, oh, well, why wasn't this intuitively obvious? Well, nobody had ever really published it before. And we had equivocal results with bird bycatch, but we reduced, when we did that, we reduced fish catch. And in 2 different years when the catches were very different, the effect of putting a panel or a flag or a banner, whatever you want to call it, on a net reduced fish catch. And that really had only been reported once before. And there's been lots of studies with panels, and sometimes they help with turtles, and sometimes they might help, with other species. Anyway, we had equivocal results for bird bycatch, but we had definitive results for fish bycatch, making it really a sort of no-brainer to pursue anymore. And when we looked but we tried it. We had 3 different kinds of panels, small checks, large checks, stripes, and none of those were different from one another in either year. And I think one might have varied from the control net. I should say this, every time we ran a test, these were simultaneous nets would be unaltered, and then right next to it would be a net with a flag on it. So these were immediate controls, which would, account for fishing variability and placement and season and all those other things. But anyway, we didn't get anything out of it. So what's next? A master student who was on an exchange from the Iceland program, students that have come here in the past, he had a geography background and did a gear comparison in terms of ecological score, economic score, and social score, talking to fishermen and interviews with fishermen. And, comparing gill nets, cod pots, and hand lines. And, as you might expect, well, when you do that, well, who's going to be the winner? And the winner in terms of sustainability is what I should say, is hand lines. But, it's not like, and I know, fishermen, we work with fishermen who use gill nets all the time, but while they're waiting during the day for their gill net sets, they're hand lining. I know fishermen from Bay de Verde who catches his entire quota by hand lining. Fishermen in Petty Harbor hand line and just catch all their gear on hand line. So it's out there. And what we thought, well, if we want to maybe move or reduce gill nets in the water, well, maybe we can enhance handline fishing to get people to move maybe, or spend less time gill net fishing. And so Robert Blackmore, this is a honors thesis that Robert ran, and we tested green light, and this obviously we inherited the green light, anyway, from everybody at the Marine Institute doing all this work. And, so we put green lights on, and, we know that cod, occur in that kind of lighting environment. But we put green lights on above jiggers, and we use different colored jiggers of green. But we could show that when you put a green LED above a jigger, you could get an enhancement of catch rate. So we then, so that was Robert's honors. This is how the setup worked. There's the green LED. And again, this was run, this is, again, Pierre Paul and I co-supervised Robert. This was run in Petty Harbor. And no effect, if you look here, no effect of the green light. And this is what we were really hoping for, because this is with commercial fishers fishing as they would, good controls. Some days you use the green, other days you use no light, and same crews, same places, same fishing. So anyway, no effect. And then a lot of variation among fishers, but overall, no effect. So what do we conclude from this battery of studies that we've just gone through with a bycatch? Well, we did show a positive population response from the gill net removal after the moratorium. We did show that discard termination had a negative population response for surface feeders. The high contrast mitigation that we tried reduced fish catch. So essentially there's no effective mitigation for seabird bycatch and gill nets, even though it kills lots and lots of birds. And, so what are the options? Maybe short soak times for gill nets seem to reduce bycatch sometimes, and gear switching. And again, we couldn't enhance the hand line, but we showed that. But I really feel that we can revisit that with long lines. I'm not convinced that we can't, help. Lots of tuna. Paul Winger would know this. Tuna fishermen, sword fishermen who use long lines, they often use lights, and presumably enhances their catch. So anyway, it'd be worth trying again, I think. So the last thing I want to talk about is this anthropogenic light. I mean, it's probably besides the fishery and it's probably the biggest change we've made in the environment, and most of us don't pay attention to it. And we're going to view it through the eyes of the Leach's storm petrel, which is the smallest and most abundant breeding seabird in eastern Canada. It's globally vulnerable. It's nocturnal. It's like many nocturnal animals, it's attracted to light, and sometimes fatally. But the reason the species is listed as endangered, it has a listing in Canada as, I think, threatened. But anyway, the reason for this is this massive population decline in the past 30 years or 40 years. And Bacalou Island, just at the mouth of Conception Bay, largest colony in the world, the largest species colony, has about maybe 40 or 50% of the species population. Well, and it had 3.3 million pairs when we surveyed it in '84, and that's down to less than 2 million pairs when it was resurveyed by Canadian Wildlife Service in 2013. So major blip. And there's lots of people concerned about this. Once a species gets listed, it gets lots of attention. There's more than, and this vulnerable species are abundant species are highly, highly vulnerable. This is the kind of thing, because, there's lots of them. Yeah, there were lots of cod, there were lots of passenger pigeons, there were lots of great auks, and these abundant species are really vulnerable. Anyway, there's lots of people studying the hypotheses that could be drivers for this: pollution, climate, habitat predation. And we know, plastic is out there, it needs to be investigated, but mercury doesn't seem to be a driver from the research, current research. Climate, probably huge. Breeding habitat, marine habitat. Predation, not a problem as a driver, at least. No predators on Bacalou Island of any consequence, essentially none, maybe some local effects. But we focused on light, and we focused on anthropogenic light for a reason, because these birds are the most attracted to offshore lighting. And, they die fatally by collision, by oiling, by stranding, by predation of other animals that are in the vicinity. So what's changed that's absolutely coincident with that population demise in the past 35 years? Well, offshore platforms have flared and lit up the offshore that was formerly a dark environment where the storm petrels forage. Vessels now are, and just now, you can see it in the past 5 years, it's going to happen next year, this year. The vessels are gearing up with LED lights like they just didn't do 10 or 15 years ago. And coastal lights are all churning into LEDs. So we not only have light pollution, but we are just intensifying that light pollution. The LEDs have really strong blue wavelength components that are attractive to birds. So let's just take a peek at each of these quickly. In the offshore, this is a mega study by April Head. The foraging, it was small GPS that tracked the foraging ranges of seabirds from 7 major colonies in eastern Canada. The red and the black are the primary ones. We're concerned with the red is Bacalou, the black is Gull Island. So these are the 2 largest populations of the bird. And if you look at the bottom panel in the center, and you look at the kernel distributions of the different colonies, you can see the overlap. This is the hydrocarbon platforms in Nova Scotia as well, the gas platform there, but you can see the overlap with the foraging ranges. So clearly there's an interaction. And when you from the satellite photos, you can pick up on the the new lighting in the offshore that simply wasn't there 30 years ago. And there's the footprints, the catch basins, the light catch basins. So Sydney Collins just finished her master's, using GPS tracking of storm petrels from Gull Island, the second largest colony here. And what she showed, these are well, I should explain something first. The storm petrels are nocturnal, which means they come to the colony at night, presumably to avoid gulls and for whatever other reason, but they're only in the colony at night. So they're constrained to be on land at night. And at sea, they're constrained to feed at night. They feed on lanternfish and bioluminescent prey off the shelf edge. And so they have these 2 constraints. I have to be here at night and I have to be here at night. And, sort of there's nowhere in between. So Sydney, who's tracked these parental birds, this is during chick rearing, from Gull Island, has shown that in fact, when the birds are, closest to the platforms, they're transiting. They're not, they're not in, area restricted search. They're not in intensely restricted search where they're probably feeding the black points. But what she's shown, and importantly, is that, yeah, they're transiting. So this is going to minimize their time, in proximity to the platform. But the more important thing that she showed is that not only that, but they're passing during the day. Almost all of these birds are going during the day. So when those platforms are flaring, they're outside, the birds are outside the catch basins of those lights. So it looks like we're not going to find a driver for the adult mortality in terms of that offshore platform. So what's the problem, you might ask? Well, the problem is that we know the fledglings just go bananas hitting that platform outside the breeding season in September and October. And we know from April Head's research that there's low adult survival. So we've got to go and find out, well, where is that coming from? And and this is something where Sydney is launching part of her PhD, and she's also, well, this is also work Canadian Wildlife Service is doing as well. And this is GLS tracking. These are, devices that we put on the birds and let them at the end of the breeding season and watch where they spend the winter. And this is different colonies, but you can see storm petrels will winter off of Northwest Africa, some right down to the Benguela, some actually into the Antarctic, but here, huge fisheries off of Northwest Africa, huge oil production off of Northwest Africa, and then coming back by Brazil, just huge production platforms for offshore oil. So that's the next step, to look and if we can evaluate risk outside the breeding season, after having shown, at least for adults, it doesn't seem to be a major crisis during the breeding season from Sydney's work. So to take a quick look at coastal lighting, this is Bay de Verde. People might know it. This is this massive fish plant in Bay de Verde. Boats are coming in and out of here all the time. This is what it looks like at night. And that's what it's looked like for about a decade. And in 2000, let me think, in 2019, in 2019, I I just on a whim, I just said, screw it. I just walked in and talked to the fish plant manager. I didn't know him. I was just in the area, and I didn't have it. You know, the secretary says, "Do you have an appointment?" No. And he was, you know, gracious enough to, you know, let me come in. And I said, you know, if you turn off these lights, it might make a really big difference. And you know, he was really helpful and responsive. At the, you know, the basic response is, well, those birds are here all the time. They always die. We get lots of them. But he did well, and with the owners, the Quinlan brothers, they agreed, and they turned off the lights for 2 years. And so when the lights are off, there's still light. And the proviso is when a boat comes in to unload, there's a boat over here on the right, the lights have to go on for safety. You know, they're unloading catch and there's forklifts and yeah. And, but even a bit better than that, I've spoken with the harbor master, and we've actually got these harbor lights turned off as well. And we've shifted that a bit, and that we're actually running. I guess it, you know, I just want to say that. I mean, what we're doing now, and this is part of Tori Burt's honors thesis right now as a first start, is we're running on-off tests with the lights. And you know, even though they were off for 2 years, we put them on a random schedule of on and off, and then we have from a fisheries monitor there, we have some estimate of the number of birds that come in at night, and we're just doing a comparison of numbers of birds with on-off, and it looks like there's a difference, but that's something that Tori's working on now, and it's something that we're going to experimentally go for in the upcoming breeding season. This is just showing strandings of leeches, storm petrels on the island, which is common. It also shows fish plants too, though, because they're often lit up. And the reason the fish plants are important is because, well, I'll show you in the next slide, is because the lit up fishing boats come into those fish plants. So anyway, we're looking at that kind of spatial pattern. But the temporal pattern is for strandings, and this is true on the offshore, this is true for the coast, this is true for support vessels in the offshore, that most of the strandings are in September and October, and that's the fledging period, is when the young birds go to sea. So this is a critical time, and if we want to mitigate, you know, and we've done this many times with no consequence, but we'll continue to do it, to say to the oil companies, like, if you can just tamp your offshore lighting, or do your flare refit in September and October, it could make a huge difference. And so we'll continue to make those kind of requests, and we'll do it, you know, at this fish plant. And we're going to work, well, we are starting to work at other fish plants on the northeast coast in Musgrave Harbor, and hopefully to Valleyfield as well. Anyway, we know when it occurred, when the bulk of this mortality occurs from the young birds. And this is the last thing I'll mention, because this is just upcoming research and we don't have a great handle on it yet. But we're going to get, well, we know, this is from Paul Winger's lab, you know, that again, the fishing boats are just, you know, as you look at, again, even look at the time frame for the leech's storm petrel demise, and when fishing boats started using LEDs, and the great increase in which they're now using them and shifting from other light sources. So we're going to get, you know, some students on fishing boats, and we know, you know, this is a consequence of the cod moratorium. You know, the crab fishery just has gone, you know, it's our big economic driver these days in the fishery, and this is crab catch in Newfoundland, and you can see from, you know, moratorium time to the present, it's just this massive pulse, and that means a lot more vessel traffic at night for a lot of these boats, and that means vessel traffic near colonies. And that's a big deal, because we know from fisheries observers at Beta Verde, from the wonderful fishery observer that works with us, Sherry Green, she said, look, the storm petrels are lured in by the boats at night. And so Quinlan has even asked the boats that land fish at his plant to tamp their lights, just use your running lights when you're coming by Bacaloo. But we don't know where those boats pick up the birds or when. And most of the fishermen have completely ignored that request. But we'll stay on that. And eventually what we will do, I mean, Parker Dorian is coming to do a master's on this. What we will do is eventually hire fishing boats where we can actually turn, just test it directly, lights on, use the transits that crab fishermen use, run it with lights on, run it with lights off, and just see what the influences might be with a direct test. So that's really about it. I can wrap it up here, so from this part of the research, it looks like breeding adults actually are coping with the offshore flaring and light via the nocturnal constraints in the colony and at sea. The risk for fledgling and adults during the non-breeding season needs attention. We'll be working on that, and lots of other people from Environment Canada will as well. And this, it looks like, I mean, it's so obvious, but we want to be able to test it. And so, I mean, I've asked the fish plant in Musgrave Harbor to turn off the brilliant LED lights. And when there's no boats around, there's no rationale that I can, and I collect dead birds, and I've got one of the high school students in the community collecting dead birds in Musgrave Harbor. And we get lots of dead birds when there's no boats around and the lights are on, and they always go to the buildings with the lights. So I've actually asked the harbor master and the fish plant manager about turning off the lights there, and they haven't responded, but I feel pretty positive that we can work something out. And anyway, so we're going to do that, and maybe other places. If we can show there's an effect, and then we can get fish plants to turn off their lights because it's a place where the boats are coming, and we can do something with the vessel LEDs. Maybe we can make a difference, and that's really the objective, of the research in the long run. So that's really it. Lots of things on the go, and yeah, I should just thank the students who've all contributed, and the many funding agencies that have helped as well. So Colin, that's it for me. If anybody had any questions.
All right, yeah, thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, do we have any questions for Dr. Montevecchi? You can go ahead and raise your hand in the chat and I'll call on you. Or if it's slow, just chime in.
Was there a question?
I don't see one yet, but
Oh, okay. Well, I can just keep talking. No, okay.
So I used to be a commercial fisherman out of Washington State, and so I've seen some of this stuff. I've seen the bird storms, and I was kind of wondering. It seems to be most prevalent when it's foggy and at night, and then all of a sudden you can have hundreds of collisions on a big vessel. You would see hundreds of collisions, usually fatal. Sometimes they're just disoriented, knocked out or something like that, and then they fly off. But yeah, is that something that's common here, like those big bird storms?
Absolutely, yeah, and like I said, when you say a lot, you leave a lot out, but absolutely right. It seems like, but we have, I must admit, when we've done our most intensive tracking, and Sherry Green, she's the fish monitor in Beta Verde. She's had nights when there's been lots of storm petrels, no wind, clear, and you still get, you still get an event. Now, whether that's connected to a fishing boat or not, I don't know. But the answer to your question, Colin, is yes. There's no question. When it's foggy, for some reason, the birds lose some orientation and certainly come close to land. They often strand on land, places like Cape Race, Cape Spear, lots of places in the fog. So yeah, there's something going on which might suggest that they really do need, some kind of, natural nocturnal lighting for orientation. And when you black that out, they're in trouble or they're disoriented. So yeah, that's a huge thing. There was a recent wreck in New Brunswick where birds hit, I think it was a it was a tower, like a radio tower. And these weren't seabirds; they were mostly warblers. And it was on a night when there was an intense fog, and again, it was on a night though in September and October when we know those birds are migrating. So it'd be a time that we should be, if we ever had a time to mitigate the lighting or whatever, it would be at that time. But yeah, fog's a big problem for sure.
Well, thank you. Khan, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Bill. Very nice to see you again.
Was that oh, hey, Khan, that was your work we were looking at. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, so could you please discuss a little bit about how the oil spill from the platform and vessel, from the tank vessel, for example, the oil spill from the vessel in the south coast of Newfoundland a month ago, effect on how is effect on the seabird population, and how is compared with other factors like light pollution and fishery bycatch.
I get your question. Yeah, that's a great question, Khan. Let me see. You know, the thing about seabirds, and this is the amazing thing. Look, it's us, and they get so much thrown at them. Right now, like us, every animal on the planet is being challenged with climate change. And, we just looked at warming ocean and what it's doing to fish and how it affects birds. But these birds, just think about these birds. So they get um, they get killed by offshore lighting, coastal lighting, lighting on vessels. Those are all huge problems. And then bycatch, we know it's hundreds of thousands of birds, and we don't have a documentation to say how many birds it is. And we would like to have that. Um, Nobody has it, to my understanding, but I think the real question for the birds is and I think your question's great, but I think the real question in a way for the birds is the cumulative effect. So look, so these birds, just to make a living, they have to, the MERS, they migrate from the Arctic, they come down here in the winter, they've got to find food, they've got a short day, they've got to find food within a day, within a day, which is very short. They need to get 50% of their body weight to stay alive. They're hunted, they got, offshore lighting to deal with, they got gill nests to deal with. And so it just seems to me that we just continue to ratchet those issues. And that's why it seems so important to address them. But I don't know if I had to rank which is more important. Like, clearly, we have numbers from bycatch, and we know it's large. We know it, and so there's lots of attention being paid to it. I think the light mortality is very large, but there's minimal documentation, and part of that has been because there hasn't been really strong regulation to really get those counts at the platforms. And so, we're working with Environment Canada now to try and better those estimates, or even generate some. You okay with that, Khan?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I was going back to thinking about your gill netting, when you were talking about gill net bycatch. And when I was a longliner, that's when they started implementing. They just started from UW. They did some research at UW, and they started uh, trying out this new bird line. And so it was like this line that hung from the mast, stretched behind the boat, and trailed from the boat.
Right.
And then from the rope were these tubes, these little rubber tubes that were bright orange, fluorescent orange, that hung from it. And our bycatch of albatross, just plummeted. And then they just mandated this bird line. I think maybe 2 years later. It was so effective, right, that
Yeah.
it was mandated immediately. And it was awesome, and it's really easy to do for a fisherman. All you have to do is toss this line overboard with a buoy on it, and it trails behind your boat. That's it. So it's really useful, easy to follow. But of course, that's in the air, and that's outside of the water where it's bright and fluorescent orange. What I was thinking about for the gill netting example you were using is it must be difficult to use color since you're going underwater, especially for the deeper gill nets where color isn't going to transmit as far, especially that color that might deter a bird. So is there anything like where you're trying to use something that produces light or something like that that might mitigate bycatch rather than just using contrast? Can you use color instead?
Yeah, people do. Yeah, that's a great question, Colin. You've had a lot of fishing experience, and what you just mentioned, those Tory lines that scare the surface feeders, the albatrosses. Yeah, it's because of an intense, scientific community in the Southern Ocean that really pursued that. And right, longline bycatch in the Southern Ocean, they've I don't want to, you don't want to overstate these things, but they've stopped the problem. They've done it. They've come up with that solution. Um, and yeah, the color thing. So there's lots of, there's been, as you know, I'm sure there's auditory ways to try and detract birds from nets, whales, seals. There are lighting, different LED lights that have been used at varying degrees of success. But the most one interesting one, it's this guy Jan Buzel. It was actually it's a paper in Proceedings of the Royal Society just a few months ago where they actually put these decoys above gill nets that they simply had eyes on them. They were you know, just prototype eyes, which apparently are have a predatory influence. Anyways, they showed that it kept birds away from the gill nets, and I think these were mostly sea ducks, but it was an above water attempt to defer animals from the proximity of gill nets. And so there's a lot going on for sure. I think, yeah, there's a lot going on, but yeah, it's baffling, but there's no way to address that gill net problem. This was one alternative that was offered. Some people have had some success with LEDs, but it's mixed. So it's there to we need to do what was done in the Southern Ocean to solve the problem.
I see. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I think we'd also use before the bird lines came by. This was a big problem because not only for catching birds, because we didn't want to catch them, but also they were eating our bait, right? So they were just demolishing our bait, and
Right,
it's really frustrating as a fisherman when you're
right.
throwing out all that gear and doing all this work, and then the birds are eating it off. So we were taking it upon ourselves to try to deter the birds from being in the area. So, and I don't condone this, and this was way back then, but we caught birds on accident, right? And
Yeah.
we would use this. You would use that bird hanging by like it was dead already, and it was hanging by where the bait was going down into the water, and that would deter it. So using like death as a deterrent, that's one thing we used.
Yeah.
So the
I
birds were
don't know. I
really
mean,
scared of
yeah,
the
I
dead
mean,
bird.
you probably wouldn't get a permit for that, but it seems
Yeah,
sensible to me, and there might be ways to use a decoy of a
yeah,
dead bird. I mean, we've used because I've had dead birds with crows and birds that are really bright, and they know right away if you've got a dead crow or something. They just know it's a problem, and they respond to it. So it might be possible to use decoys in those kind of situations, to help tamp a problem like that for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
That's kind of interesting. And if you got a dead bird, I'm sure you wouldn't get a permit for it,
No,
if you see something that works, I don't know. I'm sure, it'd be possible to decoy it if that might work, and help because it's helping the birds anyway. So
Yeah, yeah, and and back then we weren't getting a lot of help with that, and we didn't want to catch them, and so what we're just not gonna we're just gonna keep catching birds. It's like we got to do something. We were
Yeah,
using Roman candles, and we were just you can't keep buying fireworks for fishing, so.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
And I've seen that at dams before too. So I worked on some dams where they used flags. They used colored flags, but that didn't work very well. But they tried.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Well, if you come up with any ideas, I know you're working with green light. If you come up with any ideas, we'd be happy to. And you get so many people there at the Marine Institute, that engage these things. Like Khan's an expert on light, use of light, and and Pierre-Paul Biton, he really, expert in wavelength manipulation and things like that. So there might be lots of other things to do. All those lights on the fishing boat, if we can get the blue wavelength component out of the LEDs, well, maybe we can still have the LEDs without the attractive blue wavelength. And, that would be an objective and a target that would really go a long way.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely a lot to play around with there and experiment with. All right. Well, do we have any more questions? Did you want to? I mean, if you don't have anywhere to go, you can show that video if you wanted.
Well, sure. I don't know. Is there anybody still online here?
Yeah, we have 20 people or so.
Oh,
15,
okay.
20
Well,
people.
yeah, I mean, I really like this video. It's where to go? Oh, all right. Let's see. Let's see if it works here. Yeah, so this is just going out of Musgrave Harbor with some fishermen who, the herring fishery was good to use for a bycatch experiment. Yeah, Jessica Lamar, a number of graduate students, Robert, no, Jan, worked on this. And actually, my daughter Marina was working with our crew that summer. Anyway, you coming up to the net, you can see the gill net down below the surface, and you can see there's one of our striped flags, and yeah, there's another striped flag there, and you can see the flags in the herring. It didn't look like there was a deterrence of fish and flags. I mean, there's fish right next to it, but when we put it together overall, and we did catch some birds, and most of the birds were caught in control nets, but we didn't catch many. So it didn't. Yeah, no, look. Yeah, I'm not sure. This is another net with a stripe, but these would be nets. I think in this series we would have a striped, a checkered, and a control net that had nothing. And so this is just a herring coming into the boat. Um, and I can move up a bit because I think there's some shots. I mean, this is, if you ever been out on with fishermen on a boat. Oh, wait, yeah, there's one of our large check flags coming in, and in some of these instances, you'll see. Just move up a little bit. The gulls actually coming in, so they'll often get caught in nets. Oops, so I get the wrong one now. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Oh God, doesn't make it started again. I shouldn't have done that.
Looks like you can skip
Try
forward.
this. Yeah, there we are. And those coming in. And there we are. But the gulls will sometimes, cormorants as well, sometimes get caught in these things. And there is other bycatch. I got to tell you, there's a concern for bycatch. I mean, we've caught porbeagle shark. We've caught Atlantic salmon, species that are concerned, besides birds. So, yeah, so here's some gulls coming in. There's one that, and some of the fish we got, I didn't put them in, but we've got some pictures. I meant to put it in, of some fish that have obviously been hit by the birds, because you can see. Yeah, this guy, I think this guy goes right down for one, but where there's actually, yeah, well, he actually got one, if it's out of the net. Um, yeah, where there's this Yan Roussel, that's my daughter Marina there. Yeah, so that way, that's fun research. You get to eat herring.
Yeah. That's
hang
the
out with
biggest thing about
fishermen.
being a
Yeah,
marine
it's good.
biologist, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
bycatch.
But you know, that's about
Freaking
it. But it just gives you a sampling of you know, what was going on there. You know, it's really kind of interesting to do, but we don't, you know, we haven't decided to try anything above water, and it is an option. I don't know. It just doesn't interest me right now because it, you know, that was 3 years of work, and all we could, you know, have a negative effect at the end of it is kind of tricky. And you know, I mean, we're going to try to publish it. I think it's important to publish a negative effect, but we really, and we actually had a negative effect with the attempt at handline enhancement as well. But again, that exploration was really important, and for some reason that seems to be the better one to pursue. I mean, Robert's now testing, well, he has tested, he's analyzing cod associations with different wavelengths at the marine lab, and you know, I don't know, maybe that will suggest something that some other wavelength or whatever. I just don't know, but yeah, I just kind of like that option. We've been approached by, you know, fishers and Fogo who are interested in bycatch, and you know, and a lot of, you know, so many guys are shifting to long lining now. It would be nice if we might be able to do something with that. And here, you know, in the Northern Ocean, we don't have albatrosses, but you know, it's fulmars that really seem to be getting hit on the long lines. So, and there's lots of fulmars, but it looks like they're one of the speed. And shearwaters take those birds. They just get hammered everywhere by everything. But shearwaters also get caught on the long lines.
Well, yeah, I'm not as familiar with the bird bycatch up here, but definitely seen it a lot on the West Coast. All right. Well, I guess I'll wrap it up there. I know DFO people have to be at another seminar here in about 20 minutes. So,
God,
and
good luck.
a
It's too
lot of the
nice a
Marine
day.
Institute too.
Look, it's too nice a day to be. Okay, good luck. And Colin,
Yeah.
thanks so much. And thanks to the crew up there. And anyway, we'll keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
there's
Before
Christina.
I
Oh, and there's Joanna.
before I
Okay.
officially end it, I do want to
All
introduce
my
next week's.
friends. Okay, in Jordan. Okay, yeah, listen, thanks a lot, guys. And okay, we'll keep talking. And thanks, Colin. We should talk about fishing sometime,
Yeah,
but
that'd be a
not
lot of fun.
virtually. Not
Yeah.
virtually,
Right. Yeah.
please.
Well, I'll be around in Pierre Paul's lab,
All
you know,
right.
occasionally. So,
Okay. All right.
all right. See you.
Okay. All the best. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so everybody here next week, we do have Dr. Cynthia McKenzie from DFO giving a talk titled "The Impact of Invasive European Green Crab on Native Species and Coastal Habitats in Newfoundland and Labrador." So yeah, so that's next Wednesday at noon on the 23rd. Yep. So anyway, have a great Wednesday, everybody, and take care. I'll see you in 17 minutes.